Hello and welcome everybody to our webinar on automatic infrastructure monitoring for MSPs. We're really excited to have you all here today. We have some good insights and knowledge to share, and really talk through some of the pains that we've seen some of our customers experience and introduce to you our four-step methodology. Here is the agenda. I will be discussing a little bit about Shadowsoft and Isinger and our relationship with the product. Jeff Williams and Brandon will be talking through the four-step methodology. They'll walk us through a demo, and we will be doing a question and answer at the end. I do encourage you to use the chat pane on the side. We'll take the questions, but we'll wait till the end to answer them. About Shadowsoft, we are a system integrator with core capabilities around infrastructure monitoring and automation. We've been in business for 10 years now, and a lot of that time we've had a strong focus on open source technologies. What's really exciting about the topic today is these two core capabilities are coming together to really automate your infrastructure monitoring. We're going to talk through the four-step methodology that we use at MSPs around North America, and hopefully shed some light on some of the experiences that we've had. The technologies that we work with here are Isinger from an infrastructure monitoring perspective, and automation, we have Ansible, Chef, Puppet, and Terraform. So we really sit as this agnostic provider. We don't mind what automation tool you use, but we can certainly help you integrate it with Isinger. We've been partners with Isinger since 2016. In fact, we are the North American support provider. So what that means is that any client that is looking for support around Isinger in North America, they will be working with us. We handled the level 1 and level 2 and work quite closely with the Isinger team in Germany. What that means to you is that we have a good relationship with the guys over there, so we can help guide roadmap decisions and things like that. And we've been heavily involved with integrating these automation tools. We have a couple of camps coming up. So if what you learned today sparks a bit of interest, I do encourage you to join us in May. We have a camp in Seattle for our West Coast folks and a camp in Atlanta for our East Coast folks. We'll be following up with dates and specific details after the webinar. All right, enough from me. I want to introduce our speakers today. We have Jeff Williams, who heads up our monitoring team at Shadowsoft. Hello. He's really involved with our clients from a strategic standpoint and also with the product Isinger and where we want to be moving forward this year and next. And we have Brandon Engelberth, who is a senior Isinger engineer. He's been on site with a lot of our MSP clients over the last 18 months, and he's going to be sharing some specific problems that our MSP clients have been running into. On that note, I'm going to pass it over to the guys.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for taking some time out to spend with us here on this presentation. We're going to talk about the methodology that we've devised to help people have a good introduction into getting their Isinger platforms up and running in a sensible way so that everything comes up and works. So I'm not going to talk about these 4 phases of implementation in too much detail on this slide. I just want to show that it's a cycle. We go first, we sit down and analyze the requirements. We analyze the kind of machines that we want to monitor. We analyze their networks. Then we build a platform that can monitor those roles and that network. And then we automate the connection of all those client systems to the monitoring infrastructure that we built. And then we add, once we get all of that infrastructure working and all the machines talking correctly, we extend by adding the additional bells and whistles, the features that people really want to see. So talking more about the analysis phase, what we do is we review the existing infrastructure and architecture. So especially we pay attention to the machine roles. So everybody's got web servers, everybody's got DNS servers, database servers of various flavors. We've got, application servers running any kind of application software you might think of, JBoss, WebSphere, whatever. When you have multiple machines that are fulfilling similar roles, we call those machine roles, and they're going to get monitored in the same way, most likely. So what we're going to do is we're going to build out templates around those roles. But we first have to analyze what roles you have so that we can determine what the best way to have common monitoring amongst those systems is. So that's what we talk about when we talk about the architecture of those roles. Secondly, we need to look carefully at your network architecture. One of the features of Isinger is that we can use satellite systems to help monitor systems that are on, monitor client systems that are on the opposite sides of firewalls or in some other disparate network environment and still be able to connect them back to your central monitoring system. So that's a very important part of our analysis. And so just on that second bullet, identifying patterns based on similar roles, we want to make sure, we want to make the monitoring templates as simple as possible. So we want to make sure that we're identifying all the machines that are of similar roles so that we can have similar templates based on those roles. So Brandon, what examples can you give from the field about using this methodology on the front end?
Yeah, things we've run into with MSP customers are it's be helpful to have our independent set of eyes with our monitoring and automation expertise to take a look at their different systems as the exercise goes through and talking about all the different roles, as Jeff mentioned, breaking them down into those different groups to get the most effective monitoring on each machine. So that's really the extent there, is to help the customers to get that second set of eyes, and it can sometimes be very overwhelming in the beginning when they think about the amount of machines they have, when really the amount of unique roles might not be as massive as initially thought when you get that third party looking at it.
Okay, so then what we need to do is we need to build out a core monitoring infrastructure or a monitoring platform that is based on that network topology. So there's a core number of systems. We have a diagram that we're going to show a little later that talks, I guess we're going to show it on a very soon slide, where we show the core monitoring system, and then we have satellites in the different network environments or multiple satellites to be able to handle the monitoring load in case there are truly very large number of systems to backhaul all that traffic to the core monitoring system. So we're going to build out the core monitoring infrastructure based on the network topology. Then the second step of this would be to build out those role-based templates with basic checks. So basically what we're trying to do here is we're trying to make sure that each of the machines, that a sample of each of machines in each of those roles is getting monitored correctly. And then we're going to, one principle that we try to apply in this phase is to resist the temptation to implement a bunch of custom checks. Customers are always very excited about being able to write custom checks that monitor their specific applications. We want to resist that at this point of the implementation because we want to make sure that we're focusing on getting a healthy core that's actually monitoring all of the systems, monitoring each of the different roles, and we can implement those custom checks a little later. The key here is to get something working. We want to make sure that when we get to the end of this phase that we've got a working system that all of the core functionality is working correctly in. So Brandon, what have you seen where this phase has been maybe shortcut and problems that people have run into, MSPs have run into?
Yeah, common issues are that I've seen out in the field is MSPs or any customers really trying to circumvent that basic check level. At this phase, we like to get the Isinger infrastructure monitoring itself and to not skip that phase, because if you skip it here, it becomes less and less likely that you're going to come back to it and do it correctly. Firewall restrictions pop up in this phase as well. If you're not engaging your network team early, on and getting the appropriate ports open so that the Isinger masters can communicate with the satellites and the satellites can communicate with the clients. That'll become a roadblock here. And again, to Jeff's point about, we oftentimes see customers get very excited and start to get defocused and try to do all the custom checks, which can really ultimately slow down the effort. One specific example with the build phase that we have an MSP who utilizing the satellite structure to place satellite systems in all of their customers' networks, or and also placing VPN tunnels on those satellites directly into their customer networks. And what that allowed them to do was control on that satellite that may be at a customer site how Isinger works. That Isinger satellite system only contained the checks relevant to that customer and not other customer information.
Okay, so now here's the diagram that I was talking about that shows basically the core monitoring system, which is in orange at the top center, and then two monitoring regions. Each of now this is a completely HA high availability configuration. When we're talking about HA and Isinger, mostly we're talking about having two machines in each monitoring position, two for the masters and two for the satellites for each monitoring region. Okay, so you've got the masters that are doing all of the scheduling, the tracking of the monitoring configuration, the distribution of that configuration. They're also recording all of the results into the database so that the results can be displayed on the web interface. Additionally, the masters are responsible for generating notifications. So like if you've got an alert, the emails are going to be coming from the masters. So in this diagram, what we've got is we've got the work of actually doing the monitoring and the communications for the monitoring farmed out to those satellite systems that exist in each region. Now those satellites might be on the other side of a firewall. There's very minimal amount of firewall changes that would be necessary to allow those satellites to be able to talk back to the masters. A lot of times there are zero firewall changes that are needed because the satellite can connect out to the master on the port that's designated for Isinger. So then those satellites receive the amount of monitoring configuration that's necessary for them to be able to monitor the clients in their region. They actively monitor the clients or tell the clients, hey, please execute this check for me, give me the results. Those results are then sent back to the master for recording and alarm generation if needed. So that's basically the theory of operation, how it works in this three-tiered model. And this is the model that's most commonly used at our customer sites. Okay, so now we're going to spend some time talking about automation. The installation of the core monitoring system can be automated as well, but that's not really what we're going to talk about in this part of our presentation today. That is something that we can do for customers if they require an automated installation. It is a lot faster than installing everything by hand. But what we're going to talk about is the kind of installation, the automation that will get all of your client systems connected up to your monitoring infrastructure. So there are three phases here. Installing the client monitoring software on the clients. This is first. Second is connecting those clients to the monitoring infrastructure. And the third is generating the monitoring infrastructure, the monitoring definitions that are used for monitoring all of those clients automatically from your configuration management system. And a lot of times this has to do with how much automation and what type of automated system you're using. We do a lot of Puppet, Ansible, and Chef. Can be used for other automation systems with other automation systems as well. What have you seen people use in the field, Brandon?
Yeah, we've seen all three of those, Puppet, Ansible, Chef, as well as a handful of more legacy automation tools that can get the job done to varying degrees. What we see with the automation stuff is that sometimes the monitoring team will minimize the importance of automation and how much that will ease their rollout, especially if there's if they're not used to rolling out software and deployments, the monitoring team. And along those same lines, we've seen it within organizations, kind of a siloed approach to the organization, where if the network team and the automation team are not engaged early on in the process, there might be misaligned expectations when the monitoring team needs something automated out. It may take more time than anticipated, slow down the project. So it's important to get the automation team involved from the start, so they'll know what needs to be done for the 3 different automation phases, and to what degree the organization is going to do it, if it's just install, or if they can achieve all 3. During the rollout phase, we have seen where monitoring teams may not have the specific system administration expertise to implement the Isinger tool set into the environment.
So that's where we can bring expert experience
Absolutely.
to bear.
Yep.
Okay, so the first level of automation that we want to talk about is being able to install the client software on the individual clients. So the client software, by the way, is actually the same software that we install on the masters and the satellites. It just runs with less functionality executing. So what the first thing we need to do is we need to establish an automation framework. So some customers don't have a lot of configuration management in-house. We might bring in something very lightweight like Ansible to help them be able to install the client software on their machines. But it can be done with any automation, Puppet Chef, Ansible, what have you, as long as you can install software packages and configure the settings for those packages. So the key here is to install the base, I think, 2 client software, and then also to install the custom check plugins, if there are any that are already written. And this is likely to happen later in the implementation as we talk about the extend phase. So what are some typical experiences that you've seen at this phase of automation?
Yeah, some of the issues that can run into here with just the simple client installation is there can be pushback within organizations for access to these client machines, and just installing additional software. There has to be justification around it that the monitoring team needs to be prepared for. Especially when you start talking about adding not just the agent, but potentially third-party checks, custom scripts on all your servers in your infrastructure.
Okay. The second level of automation, so we're going in increasing levels of sophistication here, right? So the second level of automation, which is a little bit more sophisticated automation, would be to connect the clients to the monitoring infrastructure. Part of the reason why this is more sophisticated is because it does involve a certain level of SSL type encryption. We need to be able to generate certificates so that these clients can communicate securely with the satellites and the masters. So key here before you start level 2 is to make sure that all infrastructure is set up and working correctly. And we're using the same automation framework that we did in level 1. We want to make sure that we're not switching horses midstream. And then we need to know where each client is going to connect to the monitoring hierarchy. So if we were to think back on that diagram that we showed a few minutes ago, each client lives within a region. You want to connect it to the satellites in that region. You want to make sure that it's clear amongst the whole team what the connection model is. And then this phase of automation is a significant amount of work because we are dealing with SSL certs and copying those certs to the appropriate machines, setting the config files, but it's a significant amount of work, but it's a much more work if you end up doing all of this by hand. So that's where the big payoff is in getting to this level of automation. What kind of challenges have you seen, Brandon, in the field when people try to do this?
Yeah, the challenges we've seen is using tools that are not Puppet, Chef, or Ansible, that might not be up to the job. They maybe don't have that ability to hold the state of a client, and you end up just having a large batch file or PowerShell script or Bash script that's overriding and accomplishing everything. Not that it's impossible, it's just more challenging. We see within many groups, different organizations, different owners of different pieces of infrastructure are using different tools, which can complicate this step as well, creating this automation multiple times and communicating with the different groups to get it accomplished. And to Jeff's point, skipping your analysis phase and your build phase will really bite you here if your network firewalls are not set up correctly, and your zones and regions and your satellites aren't configured correctly. It's going to create a lot of burden on the automation team, a lot of failures.
So then the third and the most sophisticated level of automation is to have your configuration management system actually write the definitions of for how to monitor those machines. This may only work within clients, within customer sites where they've already had established configuration management for these things. But if you do have established configuration management, then it's highly likely that that configuration management system is going to know an awful lot about those systems, and that you would be able to leverage what's in configuration management already, be able to write these monitoring definitions based on the template that we had talked about in the analysis phase and in the first phase of building out. Okay, so like I say, this is the most sophisticated implementation. Make sure that level 1 and level 2 are thoroughly addressed before you attempt to have this write the monitoring configurations. This does have the greatest payoff in terms of rapid deployment and manageability, and also if you change what those templates look like and how you're going to have sets of machines monitored, you can use your configuration management system to rewrite those configurations so that you can have rapid iteration on your monitoring config. And then there are many different configuration entry points in Isinger that you can use to automate the writing of the definitions. You can either use config files, which is the tried and true method in Isinger, or you can use the Director API, or you can also integrate Director with inventory databases. So Brandon, how have you seen people employ this, and what kind of problems have you seen MSPs get into?
Yeah, utilizing, because there's such a wide variety of techniques to get the data in. It's all about the customers, how their information is and how they can get it to Isinger. We oftentimes, although you'd love to use the API and have a fully automated system, simply using CSV files and automating that workflow through Director can be a great first step. We see customers get overwhelmed with the fact that they don't have a perfect control over their inventory. They don't even know about all their machines. But this is the 80-20 rule, which we mentioned earlier, is to, if you make it to the step, to not get bogged down in the details and get the basics going, get something going, and you'll see results even if it's not perfect.
Right. It kind of goes along with that same principle that we talked about earlier, I think, Brandon, where we talked about get something working. Like the more you can get working without having perfect control over your inventory, like you said, the happier you're going to be with your initial implementation. Right. So so now we're on extend, right? So in the extend phase, once you've got everything monitoring at a basic level, then it's a great time to go ahead and start implementing your custom checks. These are application or product specific checks that that standard check plugins do not address. So there is a very large library of check plugins out there for Isinger. Basically anything that follows the Nagios check plugin monitoring standard can be used in Isinger as well. There's just a little bit of glue code that has to be written in the form of check commands, usually, check commands and services. But if you have something that's totally not covered or by one of those downloadable check plugins, then you can write your own checks. They can be written in many different languages. And this is the time to thoroughly write those, integrate them, test them. And certainly we can lend expertise there. We've written a good number of check plugins and been very successful with that. Additionally, other tools can be integrated in at this phase. Specifically, what most customers are going to want is performance data storage and graphing. I think it generates an awful lot of performance data, and you can store that in a variety of tools, and then graphing interfaces to show how your services have been performing over time. Additionally, you can implement custom displays and dashboards for different teams, or maybe focusing on different aspects of what you're monitoring in Isinger. And also custom notifications. Like Isinger out of the box comes with email delivery of notifications. Not everybody's in love with that, but you may want to notify to various chat systems or ticketing systems or event correlation systems. And this would be the time to do that work once you know that your monitoring system is already working correctly. So what are some common problems you've seen customers run into with these extensions, Brandon?
Yeah, that's to reiterate on our theme here, what we see is customers trying to do the step too early in the process and jumping the gun and trying to get all their custom tooling in place immediately. Also, in this step, if you haven't planned out your hosts and services with all the required custom attributes, if you have done that, it can make the notification setup very easy. And this is also a great opportunity to reevaluate what you've been doing in the past, especially regarding notifications. We see lots of customers that are still, they would like to continue on with a relatively manual process where an email gets sent to the operations team, and then oftentimes the operation teams triages it, and all they're really doing is sending out another email or opening a ticket, where you could set Isinger up to do that for you.
Okay, so then just to reiterate, we're going to talk about how it's an iterative process. So we started off by analyzing the template design and how we're going to monitor all the different machine roles and analyzing network infrastructure. Then we built out a monitoring infrastructure that covers all of the different pieces of your network and also covers all of the different roles that we've identified. We automated the installation of the clients. We automated the communications and how they're connected to the monitoring infrastructure, and we automated, hopefully, the definition of how those systems are going to be monitored. And then we added in all of the extensions. Well, now that we've done all of those things, we want to iterate on that process. We're going to go back and look, see how much coverage we've got, especially if you've been employing the 80-20 rule where you're trying to get most of your systems covered. Now it's time to start looking at what about those systems we didn't cover that we uncovered during the analysis process, but we didn't have time to handle in the first pass. So I highly recommend using an iterative methodology. Nobody's monitoring system is ever perfect. You always want to go back and make sure that you've got good coverage and that you're actually covering all of the applications and systems and services that you need to be covering. Okay, so we have a couple of quick demos we want to share with you guys today. The first one is we're going to show an automation demo where we're going to use a combination of Terraform and Ansible to spin up a lab environment. We do a lot of testing with Isinger here in our shop, and we have found that the more we can automate about building out lab environments, the faster we can get different test scenarios built out and evaluated. And so we're going to show you a quick little demo of how that gets built out. And this is definitely technology that we could bring to bear at a customer site for a rapid deployment in a production or lab setting at your shop. Additionally, our second demo, we're going to bring up a system that's been out there running for a little while. We're going to show what I think it looks like. We're going to show a couple of the screens from Isinger, and we're also going to show you some of the performance data collection and graphing. Okay, so on this slide, this explains how our Terraform Ansible demo is going to work. We first are going to run Terraform, and what it's going to do is it's going to create a number of virtual machines out there in AWS. It's going to make some Route 53 entries so that the DNS can be used to access those machines. we're going to push an Ansible key out into those machines so that Ansible can do its job afterwards. And some other SSH keys is going to define the security groups, which is in a local domain would be firewall rules, right? And then and it creates all of the instances for the masters, the satellite, the database, and the web server. And then what it's going to do is it's going to create an Ansible inventory file, which contains all the IP addresses and host names for those machines. Then it's going to pass control off to Ansible, which is going to take on the more detailed work of installing the Isinger monitoring packages, configuring the Isinger networking, installing the database schema and authentication. It's going to configure the Isinger web packages and install additional Isinger web modules. And then finally, it's going to manage the Isinger connections between the systems. So with Terraform and Ansible doing all of this provisioning and configuration work against AWS, what you end up with is a working, pretty full-featured Isinger system.
So I'll take control. Okay. So to what Jeff was saying, we have a Terraform script. We simply are going to execute our Terraform apply command, which is going to build out all that infrastructure in AWS, and then kick off our Ansible playbook that's going to ultimately install all the tooling required for the Isinger infrastructure. We'll just give it 1 second, and then we won't watch the whole job go. But we'll jump into AWS and we can see that the machines are getting created, and then we'll step into the Isinger demo in our pre-baked, ready-made system here. All right, so it's making the machines, making our security groups. And we can see it starting to build out the systems here, our web server, our master, our satellite, and our database system. And again, once Terraform's done building these out and they're ready to go, it's going to pass it off to Ansible. And what you'll end up with is a Isinger system like this. Now in our demo here, we have turned off our secondary master so we can have some problems to show on the screen. So everything's not just green, so we can see what it actually looks like. So when you log into Isinger Web 2, this is what you're presented with. The current incidents, and you have listing on the left here with the service problems, with the critical unacknowledged ones at the top of the queue. And then you have your recently recovered services for services that were recently in a bad state and have recovered. And then any host problems, as we can see, the secondary master is down, not responding to our ping check. Many MSPs and all of our customers like the ability to group and see machines and their specific context. And Isinger Web 2 has this concept of host groups. And we have our Ansible job builds out some for us. We have our Isinger infrastructure machines, which would be our master systems and our satellites, and then broken down by master and satellite, and then all our Linux servers. And all this information can be pulled by that careful analysis and planning and associating the correct roles and templates to these machines. Oftentimes our customers will like to use, have over here specific host groups for MSP customers for their underlying customers, so they can look at all customers' infrastructure. And also geographic regions or data centers are also very popular ways to group machines. From a NOC standpoint, the technical overview screen is a great kind of management view. How's our total infrastructure doing? You get the nice donut graphs and counts on the states of your hosts and services. When you get to a problem analysis, the service grid can be helpful. We can identify it's cut across by machine and service, so we can see that our master 1 is having a lot of problems, and the corresponding cluster check for all our infrastructure is also in a problem state, and that's all we can kind of identify visually that that's related to this machine being down here with this graph. So we'll dive in and look at our broken master system here. If you click in, you can click in and get the details on the host. Pane to the right is going to open up. Close my left pane to get more screen coverage here. And within a host view within the Isinger web interface and service views as well, you have many of these same options. If there's a problem, there's the ability to acknowledge the problem, which is going to suppress notifications for this problem as the checks continue to fail. Popular thing to acknowledge a problem once a ticket's been opened or somebody's attempting to remediate it. The team members aren't continuously notified. Downtime is another very important feature that allows you to schedule a downtime for a host and all its services, or perhaps just a specific application on a host. If you're doing patching or maintenance, that is going to cause checks to fail. And again, that will suppress the notifications. But the checks will continue to be done, and the status will be visible within Isinger Web 2. And then with the Grafana module add-on and the time series database backing Grafana, we're able to get graphs for the performance metrics within Isinger Web 2. And as you can see, there's a big elapse in time here. This is from when we shut down the machine this morning. But with this module, you can click right on the graph, and it will launch you directly into Grafana and open up that check. And you can continue to adjust your time frame, do whatever you want to do with the search within Grafana. We usually, when we're utilizing Grafana, we'll install a couple additional dashboards other than just the standard ones for Isinger Web 2. A very common one is the Isinger Stats. And this pulls data from there's a specific Isinger check that pulls statistics on Isinger itself. And it's very helpful debugging information for your master and satellite systems.
Especially once the systems become heavily loaded.
Yes.
Yeah, as you connect more and more systems to the platform, you would expect to see performance changes on these graphs.
Correct, yes.
Okay.
All right.
That's it for the
That's
demo.
It for the demo.
I guess we have the diagram in there again. So if you want, once you're going to grab the display back.
Mm-hmm.
So that I just took a peek back, and it looks like those systems are continuing to build out. I believe the Ansible job is continuing to configure away. That we didn't want to show you all of that because that actually takes about 16 minutes. But that 16 minutes of Ansible install represents probably 4 hours of work if Brandon and I were to sit down and do all of that work by hand. Mm-hmm. And that's with us working pretty fast.
Okay, are we ready for Q&A?
I think we are.
Right. Thank you, Jeff and Brandon. Let's turn ourselves towards the Q&A. Looks like there's a couple of questions already in the chat pane, but I'm going to give everybody a few more moments to ask away.
Yeah, it can integrate with a ServiceNow. I'm sorry, the question is, can it integrate with an application like ServiceNow? We've seen it go both ways, where ServiceNow is sucking the data out of Isinga's API, or Isinga is pushing data into ServiceNow via the notification mechanism.
Looks like we've got another question here. Do you want to read it out, Jeff? And
there's not another question.
Oh, okay. So this is so give an example of a typical consulting engagement. For a typical consulting engagement where we're asked to participate, I would say there are two typical types. One would be a brand new, net new install, right? Where we're building the system out for, and that's kind of where we went with this whole presentation today, where we're we're building out the core infrastructure. We're doing the analysis. We're building out the core monitoring infrastructure. We're helping to automate the connection, the installation of the clients and the connection, and writing all those monitoring definitions, and then adding in all those extensions. And depending on the size of the system that's being built out, depending on the type of the size of the system that's being built out, these engagements will vary in length. A lot of times, a lot of the core monitoring can be built out within the first week. We would call that essentially a kickstart. The second type of consulting engagement that we frequently get called into is when we get called in to go through an overhaul of an existing, a monitoring system, maybe analyze the parts that are not working so well for the customer, find out where the implementation hasn't been as successful as it should be, and then lend expertise. Another thing that we can do that isn't straight up consulting exactly, we have, a training classes that we can come and conduct at your site. Sometimes we have, classes here at our Atlanta office, and these are really good if what you want to do is develop a lot of in-house expertise about how to configure Isinger and how to build out Isinger monitoring systems.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. We've got one last question here.
About the support contracts?
No, the presentation. I think I saw, is this presentation being recorded?
Oh,
yes.
Yeah, this is definitely being, and Ross, you can provide that, whoever would like a copy of it later on.
Yes. We'll definitely circulate this with everybody that's registered, and you can feel free to pass it to colleagues and share it with them. So as a next step, what's this interesting? For us, we do these webinars because we want to share some of our real-world experiences and expertise. I think Shadowsoft is specifically in a good position around this topic because we have the in-house expertise with Isinger and the guys that we've heard from today. And also a lot of our consultants are certified and experienced working with Ansible, Chef, and Puppet, and Terraform. So as a next step, if you want to discuss our methodology or hear more about how we can help you, I've put Serge Diaby's contact information on this screen, his email and phone number. He'll also be following up with a short email. Just let him know. If it's something that we can help you with, great. If it's something we can't, then we'll be honest and we'll let you know. Any final thoughts, guys?
I think the key here for us is that we've been working to develop a high level of expertise in being able to have successful engagements with customers, whether that looks like training, implementation, or support. And so, we want to make sure that if you have any needs in Isinger monitoring, you get a hold of Serge, and that he will put you in contact with the right teams here at Shadowsoft. What about you, Brandon? Any last thoughts?
No. Okay. Well, thanks again for joining us today. We will circulate the recording and additional information in the next day or two. Thanks again.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.